So, 7:36, coming to the final day of the year.
Yeah.
Well, we're well into it now. It's time to reflect on some of the stories which have dominated headlines over the last 12 months.
From state funerals to royal births, Wimbledon wins to Ashes defeats. Let's take a brief look at 2013 in the news.
I was running a good hour late. Normally I would be up there, yeah.
Well, with us here looking back on the year's events, historian Kate Williams and former president of the Society of Editors, Paul Horrocks. Good morning.
Good morning, both.
Good morning.
Okay, let me start with you. The biggest event then possibly of the year, constitutionally, was the birth of a royal prince.
Yes, birth of Prince George, and constitutionally this year was so important because we thought, well, there were big changes. There were going to be big changes in the monarchy, which basically meant that if a girl was born and Prince George had been Georgina, she would have gone straight to be queen. But we had all the changes, altering it across the Commonwealth, and in the end it was business as usual. We have Prince George. But what we do have now is the heir to the throne, and it's the first time we've had 3 heirs to the throne in waiting since the late 19th century. So maybe a long time so we see Prince George come to the throne.
And those images of baby outside hospital, they must have been some of the most viewed images I would think of the whole year. The audience figures I would think across the world for those images must have been absolutely
Well, there was a long wait.
enormous.
There was
a long wait. People were calling it the limbo ring because they're waiting for so long out there.
The media circus that built up before it when Downing Street actually had to issue denials that the baby hadn't yet been born, I think was just incredible.
Yeah.
Oh. Paul, significantly, the weather this year has been, well, battering us here and everywhere.
Like every time now we watch the news, the weather's in there, isn't it? You know, you turn on the BBC and the weather forecast, and we're yet in for more batterings. But look at what's happened across the world. Look at the Philippines, look at Typhoon Haiyan, 6 million people displaced. Look at the Australia bushfires. I mean, I wouldn't say we've got off lightly. We haven't. We've had it terrible here. But the weather seems to have changed across the world now. And for me, one of the images that will stick in my mind was during the Australian bushfires of that family that were sheltering under a pier. I think it was the grandfather who'd ushered them out of the way of the fire, got them into the sea, got them under the pier, and then took that amazing photograph with his mobile phone. And for me, that's one of the images that will stick in my mind of 2013.
Kate, we saw something that, well, none of us ever seen in our lifetime, no one's ever seen for several hundred years as well, in Rome, the resignation of a pope.
Yes, and a big change. We've got Pope Francis, who was our first pope from the Americas, and also our first pope ever to be a nightclub bouncer. He was briefly a nightclub bouncer.
Well, not at the same time.
Not at the same time. He is youth. He is 77 now.
You can get rowdy at the Vatican.
Getting very busy. And, you know, it's really interesting because he's a real breath of fresh air, and I think that's why he was elected. He's got a lot of work to do because he's very reforming, and there's a very traditional set of people in the Vatican who are rather against what he wants to do. But he really stands for humility, and he's our first pope from the Americas, which is the big Catholic population.
He's also is he on the list for GQ magazine's best dressed man?
He's number one.
Number
He's
one.
Time Man of the Year, and he's also Esquire's best dressed man because he is very humble. He's really said, I'm not going to wear the big posh, the glitter, the glamour of the Pope, and he drives a very humble car. And he said that priests should be shepherds who look more like their sheep. So, and he's also been very open, saying about homosexuality, who am I to judge? So I think we're certainly going to see in the next 10 or 20 years some changes on whether clerics can be married or not. But women priests, I know we're doing that in the Church of England, going to be some time, I think, in the Church of Rome.
Paul, 2013 became the year when you weren't quite sure what you were eating.
No, well, we started the year, didn't we, with the horse meat scandal. Shock horror across Britain's dining room tables that we were eating horse meat in our burgers. Some unscrupulous gowns had been... Yeah, absolutely. And I think the supermarkets, obviously, were extremely concerned about this and straight away started to issue statements that they would get to the bottom of it, which they have. But when you look back and think, actually, was it the eating of the horse meat? The fact we just didn't know that the ingredient was there. Because at the end of the day, horses, much loved species across the UK, but it's the fact that we didn't know that we were eating horse. That's the point.
And the passing this year also, of course, of a huge figure in the Conservative Party, Margaret Thatcher, Kate.
Margaret Thatcher, yes. I mean, no surprise when she did pass. She's been ill for some time, but it was a big moment, and I think a big moment in which everyone assessed her legacy and said, what has she given to us? And it was very interesting seeing the international legacy. I was covering the funeral for a lot of stations, and very interesting people saying across the world what a big figure she'd been. And I think her big legacy is really saying that the Prime Minister is assessed by how much they get on with America. The idea of the special relationship as a child. I used to watch her and Ronald Reagan. I thought they were kind of best friends. And that is what she gave to future Prime Ministers, saying you have to be best friends. You have to have the special relationship with the United States. And of course, Tony Blair took that on. Big question is, she was a female Prime Minister. Are we going to see any in the next... There's no one looking to be a female Prime Minister to me. Anyone in the next decade? Let's hope so.
Well, thanks for now. I know you're coming back in an hour. And Paul will talk about freedom of the press and surveillance and all those sorts of
NSA.
issues. Yeah, and Edward Snowden in the next hour. But for now, thanks very much indeed.
Thank you.
It's 8:34 as we come to the end of the... No, we're just at the beginning of the final day of the year.
It's the last day of the year.
It's the final programme for us of the year. It's time to reflect on some of the stories which have dominated the headlines over the last 12 months. From
state funerals to royal births, Wimbledon wins to Ashes defeats. Let's take a brief look at 2013 in the news. And with us again to look back on the year's events, historian Kate Williams and former president of the Society of Editors, Paul Horrocks. Good morning to you both.
Good morning.
Hello again.
Paul, one of the photographs that we saw there of individuals who've shaped the year was Edward Snowden, and you think he's had a particularly strong impact?
I think he's had a massive impact. I mean, it depends on your point of view. Is he a hero? Is he a traitor? I think only time will tell. He says he has revealed those details of the National Security Agency and CIA observations on the general public, if you like, in the public interest, because he wanted the public to know what is being done in their name. Of course, military and anti-terrorist chiefs, our own MI6, MI5, have condemned this as one of the worst breaches of security. And of course, a lot of those details were printed in our own Guardian newspaper and in the Washington Post. I think for me, one of the most significant revelations, though, was when we found out that Angela Merkel, the German Chancellor's telephone, was being bugged. And that, I just thought, was dreadful.
And she was shocked.
And she was
very
shocked,
distressed,
absolutely, you could see that. But I guess only time will tell.
Yeah.
Well, one man who pretty much everyone thinks of as a hero, Nelson Mandela, of course.
Nelson Mandela, those great scenes of his funeral. And of course, it really gave us a chance to look back on Nelson Mandela's incredible legacy. I mean, he is someone historians of the future will look back and say, there's no question, he's a hero. And his incredible example of forgiveness and compassion and leadership really did change South Africa. And I think he's unforgettable in what he did. And such an example of heroism and of true forgiveness, which it's a very difficult thing to do. It's very difficult to forgive.
He's for me, he's the world leader of the last century. I mean, that spirit that you mentioned there, Kate, forgiveness, to come out of 27 years incarcerated on Robben Island without a noticeable degree of hate in his heart, and then to enter into a spirit of compromise was just amazing.
And overseeing the reconciliation, the truth and reconciliation, and allowing South Africa to move forward. And I really think it's a great example for so much of the world. And let's see if South Africa can continue.
Well, unfortunately, South Africa
legacy.
doesn't look like it's maintained the same level, does it, as it did under his leadership?
Every year has its natural disasters, sadly. 2013, no exception with Typhoon Haiyan.
Yeah, well, natural disasters now with the changes in weather pattern seem to be getting worse, don't they? 6 million people, I think, were displaced in the Philippines, and hundreds have died. For me, the image that I'll always remember is of seeing a tanker, I think it was, marooned on a street on one of the Philippine islands, when you realised the scale of the devastation, when you looked on mile after mile of just wrecked towns and villages, and you just wonder now, how are those people actually going to rebuild their lives?
And the worrying thing, of course, is that it's not going to be the last one. We're probably going to see this continuing next year and the years ahead. So it is a case, I think, of increasingly we're trying to fortify ourselves against storms.
And closer to home, of course, Kate, the shocking death of Lee Rigby.
Yes, that was a big shock for many. A big shock for many of us. A huge media story, and I think one that certainly will be unforgettable. And it really struck home. It really came home to me. People said, you know, what is going on here?
Absolutely, and I think for the first time we really saw the shocking impact of those instant images moments after Lee Rigby had been basically butchered on the streets of London, and
where he felt safe, where he should have been
exactly,
safe.
and those perpetrators with blood on their hands. Those were, of course, social media. Camera phone images. So it just shows you the instant nature now of news as well. Now, I live in Bury, and Bury was where the funeral service took place and the memorial service, and we have never seen scenes and atmosphere like that of grief on the streets. It was just palpable.
Let's end on a more cheerful note, if we can. Wimbledon. Finally,
what
at last.
a moment. We were all tuned in. We were all tuned in. I mean, I was just saying that 8 million were watching him win on the Sports Personality of the Year. Andy Murray, we've been watching him for a long time, and he finally did it. Last year, what a year. And this year, winning Wimbledon. We've been waiting for 77 years for a men's singles final winner. Of course, Virginia Wade had her great success. And we haven't been waiting for a winner, but waiting for a men's winner. And
I think the moment that he won, the whole nation, if not the whole world, just was going, yes, wow,
and
fantastic.
I think what's inspiring is it says to us that, you know, you can, for little kids watching, you can be good at tennis. So let's hope there's a child watching him who in the future, when I'm a bit older, is going to win Wimbledon too. The next Boris Becker could be watching now.
You could do it. All right.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Tonight.
Yeah, enjoy whatever you're doing.
Thank you.
Lovely to see you, Kate. Thanks very much indeed.
19 minutes to 9.